Now we're gonna go back to the full market. We studied elasticities of demand, specifically price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and cross price elasticity of demand. We did skip elasticity of supply, and frankly, it's really not necessary. We will get into some supply elasticity in a subsequent lecture, but it's going to be at a very simplistic level. There's no reason to get as complicated with it as we did with demand elasticities, which is a far more useful topic, so to speak. So now we're going back to the full market. And if we remember, of course, a market contains both supply and demand. Okay. Now, if we also remember, uh, at this intersection of supply and demand, where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, the market was in what we call equilibrium. And we also called this a steady state. And the reason why we called it a steady state was because the market has no incentive to deviate from a price of P star, because it would create an inefficiency in the market. Remember, we're dealing with rational agents here, okay? So they use all available resources most efficiently to achieve a desired result. And where most is key here, because we are efficient. There's no shortage or surplus of the product. But let me just draw a representative inefficiency. Okay, so assume that the price is below P prime. Assume it's at below P star. It's at P prime. Well, we know this is inefficient. Why is it inefficient? As we've discussed before, it's because there's a shortage exists of the good, and that's simply something the market won't tolerate. So P prime cannot be a steady state, because the market has an incentive to deviate from P prime in order to eliminate the inefficiency. But how inefficient is the market? So it's got a shortage of 750,000 units. What does that mean? Uh, we just don't know. We don't know how inefficient this market is. We can say it's not efficient. This market is efficient because there's no shortage, but this market is inefficient. We can say that. We can't say how inefficient it is. On the other hand, okay, if prices are above equilibrium, say the market's at a price of P double prime, we know that a surplus of the product will exist, and we know that's also inefficient. Firms are overproducing, but how inefficient is it? What does a surplus of 1.2 million units actually mean? Well, again, we don't know. There's no way of necessarily telling us how inefficient the market is. Okay, now what we're going to do in these next videos is we're going to design a mechanism whereby we can actually measure the relative inefficiency in the market. Okay, in other words, we won't need to know how much of a shortage or surplus there is. We'll be able to tell relative to what full efficiency is. We'll be able to tell how inefficient a market is. And in order to do that, we have to bring in three concepts. Concept of consumer surplus, producer surplus, and finally total surplus. Okay. And all total surplus is the sum of producer and consumer surplus. Add those two together, we get total surplus. Now, one thing I want to caution everyone on right now, this is not surplus in the quantitative sense. This is not like running a product surplus. These are completely different concepts, okay? The word surplus implies excess, and you'll see that these are excesses to some degree, but they're not product excesses. They're not actually overproduction of a good. So that's where we're going to go now, is creating a mechanism to be able to evaluate how inefficient a market is. Now, one of the other things this allows us to do is if we implement policy, okay, into a market, government policy, so we inject policy into a marketplace, we will now be able to measure how inefficient that policy is, okay, by measuring the inefficiencies or the deviations in consumer, producer, and total surplus. So that's another nice thing about measuring inefficiencies in the market using these concepts here, because now we'll actually be able to evaluate policy and how inefficient policies may be.